I just want to know who spent some time up north that brought this kind of dreary, pretty typical Louisville weather. I will say, y'all know this, yeah, Kevin's raising his hand, he came from Mexico, so. But you all know this, that November, December, January, and February are just dreary, and that's okay because we can't wait for March, and every day we march one day closer. So, welcome to the June 26th meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville. Well, I don't even know what year it is, folks. June 26th, okay? I want one something he's having. Okay, January 26th. I'm Kevin Lynch. I'm sorry, I'm Walt Kuno, president of your club, Paul Harris Fellow. First order of business, please do like me, that I didn't do last week and blew up during your speaker. Turn your phones to silent, please. And I'm glad to have Jay Davidson today, chairman of the Healing Place, sustaining member and Paul Harris Fellow, to give our invocation. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, President Wall. I'm shorter. Please join me in prayer. O Lord, in a world where many are lonely, we are thankful for our fellowships. In a world where many are captive, we thank you for our freedom. In a world where many are hungry, we thank you for your provision. We pray that you will enlarge our sympathy, deepen our compassion, and give us grateful hearts. Amen.
And now, lead us in the pledge and the four-way test. David Snyder, Chief Development Officer of New Directions Housing Corp. And member of our Lifeline and International Service Committees.
Thank you, President Walt. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And also join me in the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and be seated. It's just so fun to always have folks that come into the podium to give the invocation or the pledge or anything else that live off our motto of service above self. And Jay and David do that every single day to make our city a better place to live. Rotarians, please make your way. Hello, Carlos. Back to the back if you have a guest today. Please introduce yourself first and then your guest.
Hi everyone, Carlos Hernandez Ocampo here, and I wanted to introduce my guest, Kristen Barrow. Kristen, stand up so they'll see. Kristen owns her own immigration law firm here in town and has done wonderful work with the immigrant community and all the recent Cuban immigrants that have arrived in town. Thank you so much.
All right. If anybody else is here, a guest incognito, that's great. But after we're finished, Craig Sherman will be at this table up here at the front that says, "Where is Rotary?" I know we're right here, but you can find out about our club. And there's Craig in the back. And we're I think the table is right here because it's set up, right?
Yeah.
There we go. We're all good.
President Wall, I think Alice, are you here, Alice? Oh, Alice is a guest also, I think second or third time. Kentucky College of Art and Design. And we have a couple of prospective Rotarians here that will be approved at our board meeting on Tuesday. I'm sure Kenya Wade and Keith Miller. And is there anyone, Dr. Alexa, Kevin Lynch is your guest here. Dr. Alexa. Is it Shirva? Shirva, okay.
It's your third time, so
all right.
you'll be regular.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
In the Kentucky College of Art and Design, do we call that KCAD?
KICAD.
KICAD.
Like SCAD, but
Like KICAD. I think that's kind of cool. Like SCAD, our own local SCAD. So how many of you all, just raise your hands, there's a bunch that actually went to our business synergy last night at Louisville Paving. And what a fantastic sight to behold there. Their offices are beautiful, right overlooking the Valhalla Golf Course. And we would not know that 600 folks work at Louisville Paving and all their holding companies here in Louisville. So we had a nice tour, got to see the facility. I want to thank, I know Matt Riggles is not here, but he's one of our leadership fellows that arranged that. And so there were a lot of young Rotarians here last night, and we all got a really great, so I wanted to take a quick time to thank Matt and Louisville Paving for hosting us. Now we're going to do this again. And a minute ago I had no trouble whatsoever, y'all. We're networking, and my notes to myself say, have somebody at your table introduce themselves first, then go around the table. I think you all can figure that out, but just network at the table for the next 5 minutes, introduce yourself to folks you don't know, and we're trying to build some networking time in our meeting time. So let's do that again today. Thank you. Okay, everybody. You know, a few of you have asked me the question, why are we doing this in the middle of the meeting? One, because we can. Two, it's because when we had our leadership council earlier this year at Leadership Louisville, a group of folks got together and says how we can enhance our meeting and what were things that were lacking. Networking is one of them, and we could do it right here. So we're trying this out to see how it works, and it also allows Sabre to deliver our food before our speaker gets up here, not to be as least disruptive as we can. So I think those through. But if you've got on your table, you have I have it here somewhere. Your sheet, and so at the very top of it, share your feedback. Just scan the QR code and say, yeah, we like the networking, no, we don't. Or any other thing with the meeting that you'd like to make comments on and how we can improve. Now we've got our announcements here, so we're not doing it from the podium until we do, which right this second we're doing a couple of things. One, Mayor Greenberg is next week, the State of the City, and it's the Americana Community Center at 4801 Southside Drive. The deadline for ordering lunches is tomorrow, so don't miss that. You can come without a lunch, but please, you ought to come and hear our new mayor in his first State of the City address. And that's one of the cool things that Rotary gets to do, is to host that every year. Another flyer on your page is if you're a blood donor, consider giving blood at Iroquois, and we're going to be doing it Western in March. But Iroquois, or come helping out, or come to say hello to our Rotaractors that are doing that. Our Interactors. Dr. Linda Barton-Moore has been working on this, and we've got 2 blood drives and teaching our young people at our schools how to give back. I've got a couple of other opportunities that are near and dear to my heart. Is educational justice, whom we've been supporting for 4 years, but we've never had an opportunity to volunteer there. And that's kind of one of the criteria for Rotary to get involved with any organizations. Not only can we give money, but we require that we have volunteers work there. And so they're having their first ever bourbon spelling bee. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that is. I am pretty sure that the students won't be imbibing bourbon. But you can have your own team, you can help people check in, you can monitor, you can sell raffle tickets. But look at that and sign up either to be on the team or to be there just to help out. Unfortunately, I'm out of town on that night, so I can't do it, otherwise I'd be there too. The second one that's near and dear to my heart, and many of you all here, Ken Salvaggio's here. I don't think that, Rick Harnett is in San Salvador, and Steve Rungworth. Oh, Larry's here. Larry Sloan has done it. So Larry and Ken, we're reading at the West End School. And they've just picked their book, and I have it in my duffel bag here. They picked the book that we read with the kids. They read every day. They read the books out loud, and once a week we go in for 1 period. So ask Ken, ask me, ask Larry. And last year we read the book called Just Mercy. And if anybody knows about Harry Stevenson and the book Just Mercy, there is a youth edition, because the youth edition was pretty tough for us four old white guys talking with 8 young black students. But it was a great experience. It was a great book, and the teacher there just kind of walked you through it. So I'm not challenging really. I'm inviting our women of Rotary to come to the West End School, and hopefully in the near future we'll have a girls' school at the West End, and we can have the girls' school. They are separate schools, and the boys' school. But that's my part for today. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask Kurt Jacobs, creator and host of Moxie Talk, and member of the Speakers Committee, to the podium to introduce today's speaker. Welcome, Kurt.
I'm short too, Jay. Well, when I was asked to introduce this speaker, I was humbled because the line of work that I do is very similar to our speaker today, and it's kind of like the holy grail of what we do, finding somebody that does what I do. And it's like a painting. I was telling him at the table. you can hand two people the same picture or whatever and tell them to paint it, and they would paint it differently. So we approach our work a bit differently, but I'm fascinated to hear how he goes about getting his guests and how he documents his story. Also, I'm going to share, to be blunt, won't mention names to protect the guilty or innocent, but some of us are getting long in the tooth in this room. There's a lot of technology. I can't tell you how important it is after 385 Moxie talks or interviews to tell your story, whether it's even into a smartphone or with more production value like what I do and what Greg is doing, our guest speaker. We've had roughly 30 of my 385 interviews pass, and I cannot tell you how priceless it is for family and friends to learn about you and maybe things that they thought they knew about you that they didn't. So that's my soapbox, that's my 2 cents. So I encourage you to do that. So you're in for a unique treat today with our guest speaker. His name is Gregory Leeson. He goes by Greg. He's an author, podcaster, speaker, and TED Talk nominee. Some of his background: he was born in Nova Scotia, Canada. He studied at Acadia University in Nova Scotia and the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, with a 1980 degree in economics. Following a brief Canadian investment banking career, he found his way as a bond trader at the Chicago Board of Trade. I'm sure that's an interesting story all alone. I love this part. I think many of us can relate as follows. After relinquishing his seat on the exchange, he languished for 4 years in what he calls the hinterland before meeting a gentleman who would become his business partner. His second career involved database-driven business applications as a self-taught software engineer. And over the next 8 years, he consulted for several corporations such as Quaker Oats, Sears, Abbott Laboratories, and then he was bought out and took a full-time job with Abbott in 1997. His third career involved project management at Abbott and Hospira, an Abbott spinoff, and Pfizer. In October of 2021, he retired from Pfizer as a senior manager in strategy and operations in R&D, and today his sights are set on writing a book entitled Ordinary People, Extraordinary Lives, Stories from the Life Chronicler. Love it. His research began on May 1st, 2022, with his continent-spanning research taking him to, listen to this, this gives you some frequent flyer amounts, man. 53 cities, 39 states, Washington, D.C., and 8 provinces over a period of 14 months. And he happens to be in Louisville today on a 5-day stint. And we're just lucky enough that our luncheon coincided and we had the opening, and so we booked him. Greg was honored in September of 2022 when one of the world's leading authorities in the field known as narrative psychology, Dr. William Randall of St. Thomas University, Fredericton, Canada, filed a nomination for Greg to deliver a TED Talk. If any of you have ever done one or been familiar with that, it is a very, I would say, thorough process. I'll leave it at that. Dr. Randall, Harvard University, Cambridge University, and the University of Toronto educated gerontology professor were amongst his first interviewees in June of 2022. And I love this part, and I'll close. Finally, and maybe most importantly of all, Greg became an American citizen on August 31st, 2021, and now holds dual citizenship between the United States and Canada. Welcome.
So I won't pick up any frequent flyer because I'm in my car doing Airbnbs everywhere. So my western journey was 8,000 miles. I got the old heck on around off to see what the southern journey is, but anyway, let me just organize these notes and where you're going. So as Kurt mentioned, I have this idea of writing a book called Ordinary People, Extraordinary Lives. Now that might sound like an oxymoron, but it really is not. When you get to know people, you realize we all do live extraordinary lives in our own way. And this all started in 2015. I was a master of ceremonies at my high school, my 40th high school reunion in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And there were about 85 of us, and since I was the MC, I made an effort to talk to as many people as I possibly could. And I started hearing some stories. Now, a couple of them I kind of knew they were going to be there, but I heard these other stories about people who did things or overcame things, mostly, is what really interests me. And I thought, I wonder if there's anyone who ever thought about writing a book about just ordinary people. Well, it turns out there are a few. John Steinbeck wrote Travels with Charlie. He took 75 days and went to 34 states, I believe it was, traveling around in this souped-up car that he had, and wrote about his journey, the people he met, and so forth. Just regular people. And with the exception of the people that he knew in California, nobody knew he was John Steinbeck. Stubbs Turkle, Chicago guy, in an institution in Chicago, in the 1970s wrote a book called Working. And what Turkle did is most of his people are from Illinois, but somewhere in the rest of the states, he got his audio recorder, put it down, said, tell me about your job. And whatever they said, he transcribed and wrote into his book. It became a bestseller. 589 pages. I think he has 128 stories, something like that. Bruce Feeler, who we'll get to in a minute as well, wrote a book called Life is in the Transitions. About 5, 6, 7 years ago, Bruce traveled all 50 states and interviewed 225 people, and he wrote this great book called Life is in the Transitions about how people get through very difficult times. It was personal to him, and it's a terrific book, and I would actually recommend it. Brandon Stanton is the last one. If you're familiar with Humans of New York, or just Humans, I see some people nodding their heads, I actually reached out to him, did not hear back yet, but he's got about 30 million followers. And Stanton, kind of like me, I did come to Chicago to trade. I lost everything. Started a new life. It took about 4 years before I started my new life and made a good career out of it. But Stanton was also in Chicago. He lost his job as a bond trader, decided to go to New York. He was into photography and said, I'm going to take 10,000 pictures of people in New York City. And his family thought, you're nuts here. Why are you doing this? That's what he wanted to do. And those pictures, he said, people would talk to him. So he started talking to people. And he started asking questions. And he started writing about it. And now he's got over 30 million followers. He lives in New York. But, you see, here's the thing. I'm a numbers guy. And not a letters guy. And so even though I had this idea for my reunion, I kind of think like this. Didn't really think what's going to happen, so I kind of put it off on the back burner. Well, a few years later, just before COVID, I was on this date with this woman, and we were talking and so forth, and she says, Greg, did you ever think of writing a book? No one's ever asked me that before. I said, you know what? I have one book in me. And I told her the story about my high school reunion and how I heard these wonderful stories and writing about just ordinary people. Do it. Well, okay, sure. So that week, back at Pfizer, where I worked, I approached a friend of mine who I trusted, and I said, I got this idea. And so I told him about the idea. The next thing I know, he's telling me about his story and the incredible sequence of events that brought him to Illinois from the University of Buffalo, where he got his PhD in chemistry, from India. He had no intent of moving to the United States. It just kind of worked out that way. And so it's like, wow, you've got a great story. Yeah. And the most important thing, though, he was encouraging. I said, okay, someday I will do this. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. Well, I'm a non-scientist, so I was working home for 19 months. I was divorced. My daughter's in university. She's over at the University of Paris now, but at the time she was in Canada going to school. And at home for 19 months, it just ate me up. But I did a lot of things during that time. And one Sunday, I was on my computer, and in one tab, I was reading a story about this fellow who had this book that seemed kind of similar to something that I was thinking. So I was reading about Bruce Feeler and his book, Life is in the Transitions. And in the other tab, I'm listening to Fareed Zakaria on CNN. And so I'm reading, and I hear Fareed say, coming up next is an author who, well, darn if it wasn't Bruce Feeler. So of course, yep, I took that as a sign, And so I listened to that interview and so forth. And Bruce talked about how he traveled to 50 states and interviewed 25 people. Travel. That's what I did. So I took that from Bruce. In Bruce's book, he mentioned Dan McAdams, the stories we live by. Dan McAdams is a professor at Northwestern University, not far from where I live, and his life has pretty much been dedicated to trying to understand the narrative of a person's life, which is so important. And in this book, he published 24 questions and says, here, use it. Okay. So now I've got the travel idea. I've got a professionally designed protocol for asking people about their lives, which I probably could not have come up with. And that's how I got to that point. Now, in his book, question 1, which my very first interview, about 30 seconds into the interview, I said, it would have been really great if this person knew what question 1 was. So I published it on my website. And even if you do not intend to be interviewed by me at any time, and by the way, I do Zoom interviews after the fact. I published question 1 on the website. Please take a look at it. I'm sure Kurt will back this up. If you haven't done this exercise, you just won't quite think of your life in the same way after you do it. It's question 1's not very long, but so I have people prepare before I meet them, where I remember to do that, of course, and it has been very helpful. After I interview someone, I then go back and interview, because McAdams interviews about 2.5 hours. I've had one go over 6 hours, but for the most part, they're around 2 to 2.5, pretty consistently, actually. After I do that, I write what I call a mini biography. And by mini, I do mean mini. It's about 550 to 570 words, where I try to capture some essence of a person's life as best I can. And only with their approval will I publish it on my website. And I publish anonymously if they wish. So I publish only 4 pieces of metadata: a name, previous pseudonym. Most people use their first name only. A few people, because I've interviewed a few public figures, have used their full name. And the other 3 pieces of metadata are name, or sorry, sex, age, and state of province for context, right? And that's it. So it can be quite anonymous. So what have I done so far? Well, I've interviewed 51 people. 46 stories are published, 3 are work in progress. 2 people have decided not to have their story published, including the gentleman I referred to earlier, a friend of mine. His story is really interesting too, growing up in India. I've interviewed published 8 scientists, 5 professors, 2 doctors, 2 Olympians, a minister, World War II veteran, Battle of the Bulge, no less. Poor Jewish guy from Chicago, couldn't wait to get over there and fight the Nazis. His story is incredible. An Emmy Award winner, NHL head coach, my former roommate in university, guy who was grade 2, and Canada's #2 policeman, the deputy commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So a few public figures, but most of the people you would never have heard of. And as Kurt mentioned, I did pick up a TED Talk nomination for which I'm very grateful to Dr. Bill Randall. Haven't heard from the TED Talk group yet, but you never know. So my book, I envisioned with 3 sections. One section is going to be like Steinbeck, just my travels, who I met, what I did, and so forth, what I've seen and so forth. The second section is going to be with the people that I've interviewed, their stories with some added color commentary, and so forth, my book. And then there's this third section. And really, this is the philosophical reason why I'm doing this. So, it's no secret that we live in a very divided world. I don't think people would argue that. Some historians will tell you that we live in the most divided in this country since it's been in the 1840s and 1850s. And you know what happened after that? In my country of my birth, 2021, they had a federal election, and I watched it a bit on TV, and I couldn't believe what these docile Canadians were doing. I'm serious, I was stunned. And so I wrote a letter to some newspapers in Canada. The Toronto Globe and Mail ran it, the Montreal Gazette ran it, basically saying, what is going on? And so it is a divided world. And so in addition to the interview for 2 hours or whatever it is for individuals, I'm looking for a much broader audience to answer this question. Where are we headed? How are we going to resolve these problems that we have? Is it going to come to civil war? Are we going to lose part of democracy? Maybe we already have. Where are we? And I'm interested in people's opinions on this matter. And I'll get to in a second why this is so important to me. So I'm asking that question, and I'd like to get at least 250 or 300 opinions on the matter. I've collected a handful so far. I set out on an Eastern journey, 83 nights. That wasn't on my radar, really. It came on my radar between journeys. And so on my Western journey, I picked up a few opinions. And now on my Southern journey, I've got one more journey left, the Great Plains, before I get to sleep in my own bed for the first time in almost 14 months, actually, by the time I finished. But that's the third section of my book. And the philosophical reason is I want to answer this question. And so I picked up some feedback from my interviewees, trying to build my website, and credibility is so important and so forth. And most people will tell you it's been cathartic in some ways to just talk to a sponge about their life, and with no judgment. I'm not anybody's judge, obviously. And they find it truly cathartic to be able to do this. And McAdams talked about it in this book, and I put it on my website, that quote from McAdams' book. Of the 51 people I've interviewed, including complete strangers, 23 have emoted during the interview process in front of me. They don't know me. That's how deep this can get when you talk about your life. One person has told me it has been transformative for her. She made a decision at age 30 that no woman should ever have to make, but she felt there's no choice. And her story is on the website. And we stay in touch now. I met her at a little shop in Seattle getting chocolates. And I started a conversation, and we went our own ways, and we bumped into each other in the street. We talked for about 20 minutes. She was in Seattle for an interview with a job that she got, but she's from Los Angeles. And so we got together when we went to Los Angeles, and she told me her story. And for her, it was transformative. So, me, what have I learned from this whole thing? Well, if there's one theme that comes through from everybody, sometimes explicitly, sometimes not so much, but I pick up on it, is my life matters. It really does. And I've had some people say that to me. Secondly, I'm achieving my objectives. I'm meeting people. I'm getting to see the entire continent. That lifelong dream of driving across the exciting Canadian prairies, I finally did that. That's a joke. But I did get a chance to drive across the Canadian prairies. I see the Rockies. I saw the desert from Arizona turn into trees in Texas and so forth. Just amazing journey. So I achieved my objectives, some of them. But I still have a ways to go. People who know me know I don't dream small. I just never have. It's just the way I've been from the time I was a kid. And it kind of explains why I'm in front of you here today. And I want to spread my message to as wide an audience as I possibly can. And I don't always know how to do that. So if you leave your day, think, yeah, it was kind of neat, and you think there's something that you can add, please get hold of me. I would love to hear from you and see where that goes. There's a quote I want to tell you about. It's from Rumi, R-U-M-I, 1207-1273. Being a huge, foolish project, like Noah, it makes absolutely no difference what anyone thinks of you. I love that quote, and before I ever heard of the Baby movie, I think I kind of knew that even as a kid. It's a wonderful, wonderful quote. Before I go on to questions and comments and so forth, I want to share just a few stories with you. One is Raja, 46, Ontario. Everybody gets a title to their story. His title is Rejecting His Wealth. A tormented soul seeks a new world. Now, Raja is one of the most out-of-the-box people I've ever met in my life. He was born to an immigrant family about an hour outside of Toronto. His father was a very successful real estate developer. Raja followed in his footsteps. But his father was very dominant, man, domineering and actually abusive. However, Raja worshiped his father, his word, not mine. But at age 30, he had had enough. And he said, I'm out of here. And so at age 30, he was driving a nice car, a beautiful home, had a 6-figure bank account and so forth. He was on his way. He just walked away from it all, just like that. Since then, he has never really held a full-time job. He's living a minimalist life. He's got a girlfriend that he lives with. She's a nurse. And I would describe him as a philosopher environmentalist right now. But he doesn't work, doesn't earn much of an income except for closing a few real estate deals on occasion and so forth. But he had this relationship with his father, he never closed it. And about a few days before American Thanksgiving, I get an email from Raja. Greg, could you send me the audio files of our interview? Well, I didn't think anything of it, so I put them out there for him to download. We talked a few days later, and I found out why. His father committed suicide. Excuse me. This man, Raja, never closed the conversation with his father. And so what can we learn from that? If you feel you have an open conversation that's not been closed, close it. Raja did not get a chance to do that. Second man, another man, is Hugh. Hugh is 87, Arizona. He's one of the most interesting titles to his story. It's klutz, Olympian, surgeon, father, veteran, sculptor. Highly accomplished man. Grew up in Tucson, Arizona. His father was a prominent doctor in the area, involved with the community and so forth. At age 14, he shipped his son off to New Hampshire to attend Exeter, one of the most well-known prep schools in New England. Of course, got into Yale Medical School. Well, while he was at Yale, see, Hugh, this klutz, always somehow saw himself being part of a team, doing something physical. And well, I guess he blossomed when he was at Yale, and he made it onto the rowing team. And back in those days, the U.S. collegiate champion from the university went to the Olympics as a unit. They didn't pick and choose. And that was 1956. So he actually went to Melbourne in 1956 as an Olympian. This klutz. But anyway, he became a surgeon, moved back to Tucson. 1997-98, I think, was president of the Tucson Rotary Club, so you know him. A veteran, served in Vietnam, and in his retirement, so this is an orthopedic surgeon, right? Works with his hands. He decided to become a sculptor, and his works you'll find them throughout Tucson. So highly accomplished man. However, he lived life too, and the good doctor could do nothing when his son, age 30, died of cancer. We all live lives and so forth. Even the greatest of lives, happiest, wonderful lives, lives life. That was Hugh's story. Third story is Laura, 49, California. Would-be biologist, stripper, fantasy girl, seeks redemption. Laura was adopted, and her adoptive father, at a certain age, did not really see her as his real daughter. I think you understand what I'm talking about. But she was very bright, and she was always able to fend him off and so forth, but there was this psychological torture that she had to live with. So she went to school, studied biology, and one day made the mistake, I guess, of asking probably a professor or whatever, so how much money does a marine biologist make? Well, after she learned that, she quit school, packed her bags, didn't tell anybody where she was going, went from New Jersey, to Los Angeles for the rest of her life, basically. She was making more than that as a stripper already, part-time. So why do I want to study? I'm a bright girl, bright woman. So she had this lifestyle in Los Angeles. Built an online profile as, I swear to God, Bambi was her online name, you know? And had this certain lifestyle and so forth, including relationships with a couple of people whose names you probably would know. So there were men, there was easy money, and all these things as a young woman and so forth. Well, as life moved on, this changes, right? And so she starts thinking, what else can I do? So she met someone who said, you know, with your background, you really should go back to school and get some sort of certification, whatever, in sexual counseling or whatever. You could probably do some of that with what you have lived through and so on. Which she did. And today, the chapter of her life is seeking redemption. She no longer lives in LA. She is 49, no longer Bambi, and I don't envy her at all. But she is looking to reconcile decisions that she's made in her life with who she is now and what is to come. The money is gone, the men are gone, and so forth. But I think probably all of us at one time have a decision that we made that we wonder about it, and we maybe need to forgive ourselves, because that is what she is doing. She is attempting to forgive herself for the decisions that she made so that she can continue her life. I think a lot of us can probably relate to that, not to the same degree, but that is Laura. Now, doing what I'm doing, I am not supposed to have a favorite story. But if you held my feet to the fire, say, Greg, what is your favorite story? I think Dan's might be it. The interesting thing is, Dan is only 29. Most of the people I've interviewed have been much older, lived much longer lives and so forth. But Dan, New Hampshire, 29, his story title is Birth Family Chaos, Foster Family Chaos, A Boy is Saved. So Dan grew up in a chaotic family. Drugs on the father's side, alcohol with his mother, had a brother 2 years older. His father, from an earlier relationship, had a son much older, and he lived with him as well. And of course, he was into drugs. And then one day, when Dan was 5, bang, the son killed the father. So now it's Dan and his brother, who's 2 years older, with the mother who is not fit. Family Services comes in and takes him away at age 5 for Dan and puts him to a foster home. Well, it didn't get much better. He says the father was a good man, a nurse, but he was overwhelmed by what he called an absolutely wretched woman. All she wanted was that foster care money. They had 7 kids, they couldn't take care of 7 kids. They didn't have facilities for 7 kids, and so forth. But it was a foster care system. So Dan was on a farm too. So Dan said, I spent as much of my time as I could in the barn or whatever, so I didn't have to be in the house. And then he hit age 10. And 2 angels came along. An older man, an older woman, adopted Dan and his brother, age 10, grade 4, reading at a grade 1 level. When he finished grade 4, he was reading at a grade 6 level. His mother was a teacher. Dan had some abilities. Oh my God, who knew? Age 10, society would write him off. Isn't that what society does, perhaps? So they eventually moved from Connecticut down to Florida. And he was a bit of a fish out of water. He went to a kind of a ritzy school, and well, that wasn't really Dan. But his chemistry teacher saw something in Dan, and his chemistry teacher went and got Dan a 4-year scholarship, fully paid, at a Florida university. You see, Dan was a star athlete and a 3.9 student on a 4.0 scale. Who knew? But Dan had other plans. You see, what Dan's dream in life is, he wants to get married, he wants to be a father, and he wants to have kids. That's what he wants. He wants a nice home outside of Manchester by himself. So instead of going to university, he went to trade school and picked up heavy machinery operators, license or whatever. And he works in Boston, has a good job, makes good money, has a nice home. Had a couple of relationships that didn't pan out yet, but that's his dream, is to become a father. And Dan is a story about overcoming. And before I conclude on Dan, there's this one more thing I want to say. Imagine for yourself for a moment 3 things. 1, I want you to imagine a lumberjack competition. Now I want you to imagine a beautiful Steinway piano. Now I want you to imagine a gentleman, burly, beard, so forth, heavy machinery operator. Where would you see Dan? Now I know what y'all are thinking. Well, of course it's a Steinway piano. I know where Greg is going with this. Dan is an accomplished classical pianist. Who knew? So that's Dan's story, and I think what we can learn from Dan's story, and you're Rotarians, you guys do great works. If you have a Dan, don't give up on him or her. And so that is my presentation. Questions, comments, if we have time.
So, Rotarians, please make your way back to the microphone there. My question is, knowing Rotary, you kind of said if you don't give up on Dan, but our motto is service above self. We do lots of stuff with under-resourced youth. How else can we make an impact in somebody's life that we can be that person that redeems someone?
Yeah, good question. What I'm doing is just listening to people, listening to their stories, listening about their lives, and no judgment. There's no judgment needed. Just listen to people talk about their lives and what they're doing, what they want to do, and so forth, and be as encouraging as you possibly can. My job is to just to listen. I don't try to add anything to the conversation, and at the end of the day, I write my story. But listening to people. And service is interesting. So one of the questions in the questionnaire I will say is this. What is the most important value in human living? And I'm actually keeping track of this, actually. And love is number 1. It's 8 people have responded number 1 with love. Mine is service. That's my one.
I guess the mic is on. Just I have a 25% chance of being right. The Olympic team in Melbourne that won the gold medal for the rowing, was it either Rusty Sales or John Wales?
Was what?
The guy that stayed, the guy that got the gold medal. I knew two of the people on that team stayed at my home years ago.
His name was Hugh Thompson.
Okay, Rusty Sales and John Wales. Rusty Sales and John Wales stayed in our house many years ago when I was in high school, junior high school. They were on that team. They won the gold medal with your friend.
1956 in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Wow.
They stayed with us in about 65 or 66.
Yeah. Now Hugh actually, just before Yale won the championship in the United States, he I think got injured or something and lost his starting job, and he never really got back into the boat. But he did go as an alternate, so he did go as an Olympian. So that's his story. But yeah.
And they get involved with help with people. If you've heard them talk, get to know those guys. Another question: you mentioned your question, number one, I'd like to ask what that is the
Sure,
first question.
sure.
Secondly, if I can answer that, at least the website. You have your email address, but no website.
Yeah, so I can answer it, no problem.
Okay.
So question number one is simply this, and this is straight from Acadis. Think of your life as if you were about to write a book. What would the chapters of that life be, and how do you transition from one chapter to the next? Now, McAdams says he recommends having no more than 2 to 7 chapters. My daughter, 21, would have probably 2. I had 6. Think of those chapters of your life and how you transition from one to the next. And that's question number one, and it really helps with the rest of the interview after that.
Hey, Greg, Kurt. I'm curious, there's no end in sight with these projects that we do. My personal goal, God willing, the creek don't rise, is to get to age 80 and do 1,000. I'm at 385, so I got a ways to go on my personal quest. I was curious, how long are you going to, do you have a number where you'll cease the interviews and begin, I guess, the book?
Well, so I started my Eastern journey on May 1st, which just happened to be my 65th birthday. That is not a coincidence that I chose that day to start. And like I said, I get to sleep in my own bed for the first time on June 8th of this year. So 13 months and a week when my journey is over. Then it's time to write a book and hopefully see where that goes. Beyond that, I don't really know. My daughter graduates and so forth. Where is she going to live? I'm by myself now, and if she chooses to live in Toronto, for example, I might wind up moving. Who knows? So my future is uncertain. But the book, hopefully later this year.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just curious, since you have kind of made a profession in recent years of talking to real human beings about real human lives, whether your view of human nature as compared to what it was before you started this process has changed in any way. You seem like a really optimistic, upbeat kind of guy, but what themes have you noticed in that process?
So what I have learned is that everybody has a different story, a different background. My personal background is I grew up in a very, very, very English family that did not do this. But unlike Raja, I was a lucky one. I closed that conversation with my father eventually. I was in my 30s when that happened. In terms of, so I am novice, obviously. I am absolutely novice about things. I don't know if anything really changed much. When I was a kid, between the ages of, let's say, 10 and 17, all I ever read were autobiographies of people's lives. I was really into sports. I was a highly competitive distance runner, but you name a sport, not a big guy, but you name a sport, I was there. And so I read a lot of stories about a lot of athletes, black athletes who in the 50s and 60s had to go through certain things, even though they were professional athletes and so forth. So I read a lot of these stories about athletes and coaches. Wooden's book, John Wooden, The Wizard of Westwood, for example. So many of these books, and all those seeds got planted in my mind as a kid. And so I think I've kind of always been this way of being very interested in other people and their lives and so forth. Didn't always get a chance to express that in my careers, perhaps, but that's what I'm doing now. And so when I retired on October 4th of 2021, within a week, my website was up and running, and I knew what I wanted to do. So I'm not sure much has changed in terms of my outlook and thinking, although I have learned that people really do have different experiences as kids and youth growing up and so forth. And not what I had. Some had these wonderful environments, some had much, much worse than I ever had. I had a good environment, it's just that we didn't have that. So I'm not sure much has changed my outlook, except I have learned a lot of stories.
So Greg, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Louisville, we're making a donation of $500 to the Rotary West Louisville Housing Initiative. And so I want to do that. I need to sign that here in a second. And what that means is we're doing first-time home ownership loans in our West 9 named neighborhoods in Louisville. It's been highly impacted in the past few years, for a long, long time, but we're making a difference in getting people that cannot qualify for a normal loan, getting them to their first house so that they can start to build generational wealth. So I want to do that. I'll sign that and give that to you in a minute. So thank you.
Thank you so very much.
And we have, so get your cards out, get your tickets out. We have a ticket to the mayor's State of the City next year. You got to draw a ticket. All right. There we go. We've got 216-828. 216. There we go, Jerry. Jerry's the winner. So let me get that for you.
I will leave my cards with my contact information up here and so forth. Please grab one.
If anybody wants to talk, you'll hang around and talk to them. All right.
Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Speakers Committee, for giving us money. Guests, we have What is Rotary right over here. Craig Sherman's going to meet you. Just a little quick thing that Greg was talking about in service to others. Everybody has a story. And I wish I'd have known this, known it before the end of the meeting, but when Susie Eastman was here, a young man was in our audience who was in Western High School, early college grad that went to U of L, and now she works with Susie, and she said, Mr. Walt, I did not realize that this was the Rotary Club that gave me my scholarship. Now, he was a photographer, is a photographer. He got into, just like Susie, got to college and said, this isn't for me, but he's got a great job, great opportunities working with that 502, I can't think of the rest of them. 502 film, and but he just wanted to thank Rotary for the opportunities that we had given him, and just what we say, we never know when that one kindness will really turn into something. So folks that have been mentoring or talking with our high school kids, they all know it's meaningful. It's meaningful when that young man came up and said, hey, Mr. Walt, do you remember me? The good news was I did. So anyway, with that, we are adjourned.
If you didn't hear that, the deadline to RSVP for the mayor's luncheon is tomorrow at 5. Please don't wait till midnight.